Hello and welcome. Before we set sail on tonight's journey across the oceans of the past, take just a moment to tap the like button and comment down below where in the world you're listening from. It's always fascinating to see where our voyagers are tuning in from tonight. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and let's drift back nearly 500 years to the heart of the age of exploration, a time when wooden ships creaked beneath the weight of sails, and the endless sea stretched into darkness, broken only by the glimmer of stars. Close your eyes and imagine yourself walking across the deck of a great ship at night. The work of the day has ended. Ropes have been tightened, sails secured, barrels lashed down. The chatter of sailors fades into whispers, then silence. Lanterns swing gently, casting golden light over the planks, and the steady rhythm of the waves rocks the ship like a cradle. Tonight, we'll explore how sailors rested at sea, where they slept, what they dreamed of, and the stories, superstitions, and legends that filled the quiet hours between the stars and the waves. Imagine yourself aboard a great wooden ship, drifting far from the familiar shores of Europe. The year is 1570, and the sun has long since disappeared beneath the horizon, leaving the sky heavy with stars. They hang in clusters, silver and soft, scattered across the dark expanse like a delicate twinkling tapestry. The constellations above seem almost within reach, mirrored faintly in the gentle undulations of the sea below. The water stretches endlessly, merging with the horizon in a seamless dark shimmer, a vast canvas of motion that reflects the faint glow of the moon in slow, rolling ripples. Each wave catches the light and scatters it in patterns that seem to dance along the surface, rising and falling as if the ocean itself were breathing. The scent of salt water drifts around you, briny and sharp, clinging to your skin and mingling with the sharper tang of tar from the freshly corked timbers. Every inhale carries a mixture of ocean spray, the warmth of sun-baked wood, and the faint, lingering smoke from earlier lanterns. The deck beneath your feet creaks softly, a slow, rhythmic song of wood straining and settling, adjusting naturally to the pulse of the waves beneath. Each step sends a subtle vibration up your legs, reminding you that the ship is alive, a living entity moving in harmony with the water. Above, the sails flutter gently, pale and immense, catching the night breeze like soft wings stretching wide. They sway in slow, graceful arcs, and you can almost hear the fabric whisper as it brushes against itself. These flickering lights illuminate small details, coiled ropes, weathered barrels, and the careful knots of seasoned sailors. Somewhere in the distance, a lone gull calls, a fleeting echo that dissolves into the vastness of the dark horizon. Every sound, every movement is magnified by the profound stillness of the night. The sea hums in a low, eternal rhythm, a lullaby of motion and mystery that seems older than the world itself. The crew has finished their daily labor, the strenuous work of sails, ropes, and rigging now behind them. Ropes are tightened to perfect tension, sails trimmed to catch the wind just so, barrels lashed down to prevent rolling. Conversation fades into whispers, hushed exchanges of evening plans and tales of the day's minor victories. Slowly, even the whispers dwindle, until the only sounds are the subtle creaks of timber, the gentle lap of water against hull, and the soft whisper of the wind threading its way through the rigging. And yet, the ship never truly rests. It rocks and sways as the ocean carries it forward, and the wind carries a persistent melodic song that weaves through the sails, across the deck, and along the planks. The night feels alive with presence. Shadows stretch long and thin under lantern light, then retreat into darkness. The sails above catch glimpses of the moon, shimmering like silvery ghosts. Occasionally, you see the glint of metal tools or the curve of a coil of rope, faintly illuminated before slipping back into shadow. The ocean itself seems to whisper secrets, the sound of distant waves meeting distant horizons, carrying a quiet reassurance, as though the world itself is holding you gently in its vast embrace. You begin to notice the smallest details, the subtle smell of tar mixed with the faint scent of rope fibers, the slight chill in the night air as it brushes across your face, contrasting with the warmth that radiates from the ship's wooden beams, the gentle sway of the deck beneath your feet, so rhythmic that it almost feels like being rocked in a cradle. Your senses sharpen, noticing the creak of a hatch, the quiet rustle of a rope, the soft sigh of the sails overhead. Each detail, each sound, becomes part of a slow, immersive pattern, a melody of motion and light. And then you begin to wonder, with a quiet, almost reverent curiosity, about the men who call this ship their home. Where do they sleep? How do they find rest while floating in the middle of this vast, unending ocean, far from the warmth of hearth and home? How do they close their eyes, surrender to dreams, while the ship rocks them endlessly, softly like a cradle carried on the waves? How does a human body find calm amidst the constant motion, the ceaseless whisper of wind and water, and the mysterious shadows that dance beneath flickering lanterns? You might imagine them now, each man in his own hammock below deck, swaying with the rhythm of the sea. You imagine the captain tucked into a small cabin at the stern, the door closed to keep out the cold night air, leaning against rough wood with a straw-stuffed mattress beneath him. The officers, slightly more privileged, perhaps sharing a cabin with minimal light, the smell of salt and tar faintly lingering, and the common sailors, cradled in their canvas hammocks, arms folded across their chests or hanging loosely at their sides, drifting into sleep as the ship rocks steadily beneath them. Above deck, the wind hums through the rigging, carrying whispers of past journeys, distant lands, and unseen horizons. The ocean spreads endlessly in every direction, a dark mirror for the infinite sky above, and the stars reflect faintly in the undulating waves. Every wave, every sigh of wind, every gentle creak of timber seems to lull the entire ship toward rest. And as you take it all in, the sights, the sounds, the smells, the motion, you feel a slow meditative calm settling over you, as though you too are part of this floating world, carried gently into the embrace of night. And still the questions linger. How do men sleep on such a living, breathing vessel, suspended between sky and water? How do they surrender to dreams, carried far from home, while the ocean cradles them in its endless arms? And in that surrender, what do they see when their eyes close? Do the stars dance behind their eyelids? Do they dream of distant lands, of wives and children waiting across oceans, of storms conquered, of the gentle motion of the ship beneath them? Each of these questions swirls slowly, like the tides beneath the hull, inviting your imagination to drift and wander, carried along by the rhythm of night and sea. Most sailors slept in hammocks, swaying gently in the dim, shadowed spaces below deck. These humble cradles were more than just beds. They were lifelines, carefully woven from strong canvas and rope, designed to carry men safely through the endless motion of the ocean. European sailors had adopted the idea from the Taino people of the Caribbean, who had perfected this ingenious solution to sleeping in a world of swinging, rolling, and uneven surfaces. Hammocks were lightweight, portable, and practical, perfectly suited for life at sea, where floors were slippery, uneven, and frequently wet. Step below deck in your mind. The air is thick, warm and alive with a mixture of scents: salt water from the surrounding sea, tar from the freshly caulked timbers, the faintly sour tang of sweat from the men who have labored all day, and the sharp, lingering aroma of preserved foods. dried fish, salted pork or hard biscuits. Lanterns hang from iron hooks, casting small flickering pools of golden light over the rows of hammocks, each swinging slowly, almost imperceptibly, with the rhythm of the waves above. The shadows shift across barrels, coils of rope, and wooden beams, creating a living pattern that seems to move as the ship rocks. There is no privacy here. Sailors sleep head to foot, sometimes pressed close together, shoulders or elbows brushing against one another as they shift to find comfort. Yet the hammock's gentle cradle holds them securely, allowing even the weariest man to drift into sleep, despite the cramped conditions. Some men wrap themselves tightly in thin blankets, or fold extra canvas over their legs to ward off the chill. Others leave themselves exposed to the night air, letting the salt-scented breeze wash over them as they rest. The captain and officers enjoyed more comfort. The captain's cabin, though small, was private. A rough wooden bed filled with straw or horsehair provided him a sense of security and separation from the crowded hold below. Officers' quarters were similarly furnished but smaller, offering only slightly more space than the hammocks of ordinary sailors. In these cabins, small windows or portholes allowed glimpses of the dark sea and starry sky, while lanterns provided a faint, steady glow. The contrast between these private spaces and the swaying, crowded hammocks below reflected the hierarchy of life aboard ship. Some men commanded the vessel, while most surrendered to its motion in simple canvas cradles. Hammocks served more than one purpose. They kept sailors off damp, uneven floors where water might collect, preventing slips and reducing the risk of injury. They swung gently with the movement of the ship, so that even in heavy seas a man would remain relatively still, cradled by the ropes and canvas. Some sailors claimed that the gentle sway of the hammock was like a lullaby, coaxing even the most restless souls into deeper sleep than a stationary bed could ever provide. Stories and folklore grew around these hammocks as well. Sailors told tales of hammocks that had saved lives during violent storms, their ropes holding fast while men slept, oblivious to the chaos around them. Some spoke of hammocks that seemed to move of their own accord, swinging more gently or more harshly, depending on the wind's temperament, as if the ship itself were alive and watching over its crew. There were even whispered legends of a spectral sailor whose hammock would sway mysteriously at night, empty, yet somehow still occupied, a warning perhaps to respect the ocean and the ship that carried them. Other fables softened the danger with wonder. One tale spoke of a hammock that, when tied correctly, would cradle a sailor so perfectly that he could dream of distant lands as if he were already there. Sailors described floating above the waves in these dreams, watching tropical islands appear on the horizon, palm trees bending in the breeze, and the sun rising over golden sands while the real ship rocked far away beneath the moon. Another story told of hammocks strung near the bow, where the sway of the waves was strongest. Men who slept there were said to dream of mermaids singing just beneath the surface, their voices calling softly, guiding the ship safely toward hidden reefs or unseen channels. Even the simplest routines around hammocks became ritualized. Men would carefully fold their clothing, place their boots under their hammocks, and adjust the ropes just so, believing that attention to these small details brought luck. Some sailors carried charms or tokens in their pockets, a carved piece of wood, a tiny medallion, or even a small knot in the rope itself, that they claimed protected them while they slept. Others would whisper prayers or recite short rhymes, soft words meant to ward off evil spirits that were said to wander the ship at night, taking advantage of sleep's vulnerability. Hammocks also reflected the rhythms of the sea. On calm nights, they swayed gently, almost imperceptibly, like a soft rocking cradle. During storms, they could swing violently, throwing men against the sides of the ship or into one another, yet still holding them safely off the wet, heaving deck. Experienced sailors learned to embrace the motion, adjusting their bodies so that the sway became part of the sleep itself. Even in the roughest weather, hammocks were trusted companions, holding them as the waves crashed and the timbers groaned under the pressure of wind and water. Below deck, the ambiance was a mixture of quiet and life. Rats scurried along barrels and crates, and men would sometimes mutter warnings to one another or laugh quietly at the antics of their nocturnal companions. The low hum of the ship, the creaking wood, the distant slap of water against the hull, the gentle whisper of the wind through the rigging became a lullaby, a steady rhythm that reminded each sailor of the constant presence of the ocean, both protector and challenger. Some sailors shared their hammocks in ways that created stories in themselves. A common tale told of a pair of men who had to share a single hammock during a particularly long voyage. They would rock together, carefully coordinating their movements to avoid collisions, and in doing so, formed an unexpected bond. The story became legendary among the crew, a reminder of human adaptability, cooperation, and the strange intimacy of life at sea. Even the food below deck intertwined with sleep. Barrels of salted meat and dried fish sometimes gave off strong odors, and sailors would tell exaggerated tales of hammocks that tasted the food through the air, carrying the aroma into dreams of feasts on faraway islands. Some sailors claimed that the best dreams occurred when a hammock swung just above a barrel of ripe oranges, the scent mingling with the salt air to carry a man to imagined lands of sunlight and calm waters. The stories, the rituals, the scents, the rhythm of the waves, all of it created an environment where sleep, though never entirely safe or peaceful, became possible. A sailor's hammock was not just a bed. It was a cradle of stories, a vessel for dreams, and a silent companion through the long, dark hours at sea. Even today, one can imagine lying in such a hammock, suspended between timbers, the ship rolling gently beneath you, lantern light flickering on the deck above, the ocean whispering through the hull. You might hear a faint ghostly tale of a sailor long gone, whose hammock still swings in the night, or dream of mermaids singing beneath the waves, or islands appearing on the horizon just in time for morning. Each detail, each movement, each story becomes part of the hypnotic rhythm of the sea, carrying men through the night, toward dreams, toward rest, and sometimes toward wonder itself. Close your eyes once more, and listen. The ship may seem still when you lie in your hammock, but in truth it is alive, breathing, groaning, whispering to itself with every rise and fall of the sea. The timbers creak in long, low sighs, like the settling of an old house, except here there is no ground beneath you. Only the ocean, shifting, eternal. Every joint in the wood adjusts with the roll of the waves, a chorus of subtle, patient sounds. It is as though the ship itself is speaking in its own language, murmuring secrets to those who can learn to hear. Beneath you, the sea laps steadily against the hull, a rhythm both gentle and infinite. It is not a crash or a roar, but the steady heartbeat of the ocean, one that goes on long after you drift into dreams. Some sailors swore they could fall asleep just by listening to that sound, the same way a child is comforted by the steady pulse of its mother's heart. And then there are the small fleeting sounds that break the silence. A rat scurries across the beams above, tiny claws clicking against the wood. A barrel shifts somewhere below deck, just enough to give off a hollow thump, echoing faintly in the stillness. A rope sways against a mast with a low thrum, almost like the plucking of a giant harp string. Lanterns hang from hooks, casting their soft glow. Their light flickers and dances with every shift of the ship, throwing shadows that twist and bend across the walls. A rope might appear like a serpent for a moment, slithering across the beam. The shape of a barrel might stretch tall and thin, like a ghostly figure watching from the corner. Some sailors, half dreaming and half waking, swore that the shadows moved on their own, that the ship had spirits of its own, wandering through the beams at night. The smells are just as present. The tang of salt and seaweed lingers in the air, sharp and clean, but always heavy. The wood itself smells damp, soaked with years of spray and storms. Tar and pitch add a darker, resinous note, the smell of work and preservation. There is the faint odor of dried fish and salted meat stored in barrels, mingling with the less pleasant scent of sweat and unwashed bodies, for bathing is rare aboard such a ship. Yet over time these smells blend together, forming a tapestry so familiar that it becomes strangely comforting, a scent sailors carried in memory long after they returned to land. Above all of this, the wind, always the wind. It whistles through the rigging, hums across the sails, sighs through every crack and corner. The sound is never quite the same, sometimes a high, sharp whistle, other times a low and soothing moan. Sailors often said the wind was like a lullaby sung by the sea itself, a song meant to carry weary men into dreams. But the ship does not sleep, not truly. Even in the deepest hours of the night, the crew takes turns at watch. Some men scan the horizon for distant sails, pirates or rival fleets. Others listen for the crunch of unseen rocks or coral. A single mistake in the night could mean disaster. Yet to the men in their hammocks, those thoughts fade, softened by exhaustion, until the sounds of the ship itself become the music of slumber. Still, the night was never entirely without unease. Strange noises could stir the imagination. Many a sailor whispered of the voices that sometimes carried across the waves. On certain nights, when the sea was calm and the stars shone bright, some claimed they heard faint singing, as if women's voices drifted just above the water. Were they mermaids, sirens calling to lure sailors from their hammocks, or simply the echo of the wind through the rigging playing tricks on weary ears? One tale told among sailors was of a man who awoke one night to the sound of footsteps pacing just above his hammock. Heavy, slow, deliberate. He thought it must be a mate on watch, but when he looked up, the shadows showed no figure. He lay back down, heart racing, until the steps started again, moving closer. The next morning, when he told the crew, an older sailor only nodded and said, "A ship this old always remembers the men who walked her decks before. Some of them never left." These stories were not rare. Sailors were superstitious, and the night gave life to every whisper, every creak, every flicker of shadow. A lantern's flame guttering for no reason was not just wind, it was a spirit passing by. The scurrying of a rat was sometimes mistaken for the scratching of a ghost at the wood. The line between real sound and imagined sound blurred easily, especially when exhaustion weighed heavy on the mind. And yet for many, these very sensations became a comfort. To hear the groan of the timbers, the slap of water, the hum of the wind, this was to know that the ship was alive, carrying them forward, keeping them safe. To close one's eyes in such a world was not to escape from sound, but to be wrapped in it, cradled by it, until dreams themselves took on the rhythm of the sea. When the hammock swayed and the ship groaned softly under the stars, sailors drifted into dreams. Yet for them, dreams were not merely the wandering of a tired mind. On the open ocean, far from home, dreams became messages, omens, and sometimes warnings. Close your eyes now and imagine yourself suspended in your hammock. The air is thick with the mingled scents of tar, salt, and sweat. The lantern light sways, shadows stretch and fold, and the slow rocking of the ship lulls your breathing into rhythm with the waves. Sleep comes, but it is not always gentle. For sailors, dreams held power. A dream of calm waters and bright skies was a blessing, a promise of safe passage. But to dream of a storm, of crashing waves, or of drowning, it was enough to unsettle an entire crew if the tale was spoken aloud. Some men refused to share their dreams, fearing they might call disaster upon the ship. One common superstition whispered through the hammocks was that to dream of women at sea was ill fortune. It was said that the sea herself, imagined as a jealous, watchful spirit, despised rivals. If a sailor dreamed of a wife, a lover, or even a woman he longed for, he might wake to whispers that the ocean would punish him with storms for daring to love another. Others told of more hopeful visions. A dream of dolphins swimming alongside the ship was said to bring luck, a sign that the sea was guiding them. A dream of land, with trees swaying and birds flying, was believed to mean that shore was near, even if weeks of water still lay ahead. Sailors clung to these dreams, repeating them in the morning as if they were prophecies. And then there were the darker dreams. Some men claimed to have visions of ghostly ships drifting silently across the waves, their sails tattered, their decks empty. To dream of such a vessel was a chilling omen, for it meant death would soon take someone on board. One story often told below deck was of a young sailor who, in his hammock, dreamed of a black ship approaching in the fog. He said he saw men aboard it, but their faces were pale, their eyes hollow. They beckoned to him, silently, as though asking him to join. The next day, the sailor was struck by fever. By nightfall, he was gone, buried in the sea. The men whispered that he had been called to the ghost ship, and it had come to claim him. Superstitions filled the night like unseen companions. Some sailors slept with small charms or tokens, perhaps a coin tied around the neck, or a carving of a cross tucked beneath the hammock. Others kept bits of rope or wood they believed to be lucky. A few carried seashells given to them before the voyage, believing they carried the voice of the shore. To sleep without such protection, some said, was to invite restless dreams or the attention of spirits. And there were always tales of the sirens. Sailors said that dreams of singing voices, sweet, melodic, impossible to resist, were not dreams at all, but the touch of sirens slipping into the mind. If you woke from such a dream, gasping, heart pounding, the others might tell you the sirens had been testing your will, calling you to leap from your hammock and into the dark waters below. Yet not all tales were meant to frighten. In the stillness of the night, when stories passed from hammock to hammock in quiet tones, some men told fables meant to comfort, to soothe restless minds. One such tale spoke of the star of the sailor. It was said that every man at sea had one star in the sky that belonged to him alone. When he closed his eyes, if he dreamed of light, a bright spark shining above the waves, it was his star guiding him home. Men told each other to look for that star when fear pressed too heavily in the dark, to remember that no sailor was ever truly lost while his star still shone. Another fable told of a great sea turtle, older than any man, who swam the depths of the ocean. In dreams, the turtle appeared to weary sailors, offering them rest upon its wide shell. Those who dreamed of riding the turtle were said to wake renewed, as if the very sea itself had blessed them with strength for the days ahead. The line between reality and dream was thin on the open water. Exhaustion, rocking waves, and the strange, unending expanse of sea often blurred waking and sleeping. Some men swore they had conversations in dreams, conversations so vivid they remembered the voices clearly upon waking. They might dream of speaking to a loved one left behind, hearing words of comfort, only to wake in tears, convinced that the dream had been more than imagination. And then there were the visions of home, perhaps the most powerful dreams of all. A sailor might see himself walking familiar streets, hearing the laughter of children, smelling bread from the village oven. Some dreamed of sitting once more at a table with family, their mother's hand upon theirs, or the sound of a lover's voice carried on the breeze. To wake from such a dream was bittersweet, a momentary return to warmth, followed by the sharp ache of its loss. But sailors cherished these dreams, retelling them quietly as reminders of what waited across the sea. So the night stretched on, filled with sleep that was never entirely peaceful. The ocean gave dreams as surely as it gave storms, and sailors learned to listen, to share, and to fear what their sleeping minds might reveal. For aboard those creaking wooden ships, dreams were never just dreams. They were the whispers of the sea, the voice of the unknown, and perhaps the closest thing to prophecy that a sailor could carry. Not every man aboard the ship slipped into dreams at night. While hammocks swayed gently in the shadows below, others remained on duty above, keeping watch over the restless sea. These men were the guardians of the night, their eyes searching the darkness, their ears tuned to every whisper of rope, every groan of timber, every ripple of water against the hull. Imagine yourself climbing the ladder to the deck in the middle of the night. The lantern light below fades until only the dim glow of the moon and stars surrounds you. The air feels colder here, fresher, touched with spray and the salt sting of the wind. The ship moves steadily beneath your feet, each step rising and falling with the slow pulse of the ocean. All around you, the world is dark and boundless, an expanse of water that stretches farther than your eyes can reach. The deck itself is quiet. The sails loom overhead, pale and ghostly in the moonlight. Ropes creak softly as the ship shifts. Lanterns sway gently, their flames guarded against the wind, casting pools of golden light that shimmer across the planks. And beyond those small circles of light, shadows gather, vast and endless, thick as the sea itself. To stand watch was to stand between worlds, between the living and the dead, the known and the unknown. The sailors who kept vigil told stories in hushed voices, not only to pass the time, but to ward off the unease that crept in with the night. Historically, the night was divided into watches, each lasting about 4 hours. Aboard Spanish galleons, English privateers, or Dutch East India Company ships, this system was universal. Men were rotated so that no one was always condemned to the darkest hours. The graveyard watch, and from midnight until 4, was considered the most difficult. Eyes grew heavy, minds wandered, and strange things were often seen in the shadows. On deck, the duties were simple but vital. A man might be stationed at the bow, scanning the black horizon for the shape of another vessel or the faintest outline of rocks and reefs. Others tended to the sails, tightening ropes if the wind shifted. The helmsman stood at the great wooden wheel, hands steady, guiding the ship along its course. His only companions were the compass, the stars above, and the faint splash of water trailing from the stern. A mistake during these hours could be fatal. In 1707, for instance, the British fleet under Admiral Sir Cloudesley Shovel wrecked off the Isles of Scilly, losing more than 1,400 men in a single night. The cause? Navigational errors during the dark, when land was closer than the sailors believed. The story haunted seamen for centuries, a reminder that the night ocean could swallow whole fleets without mercy. For many, the stars were their only companions. Sailors learned to read the heavens, tracing constellations to mark their position. Polaris, the North Star, shone steady, a fixed point in an ever-moving world. Men whispered that it was the very eye of God watching over them, keeping them on their path. But the stars were not always steady comfort. A sudden falling star streaking across the night could be seen as a soul leaving the earth, or worse, a warning of death to come aboard the ship. Sailors told of nights when shooting stars seemed to fall directly into the sea, vanishing in silence, as though the ocean itself swallowed spirits whole. Some men swore that the heavens were filled with signs. A ring around the moon meant storms. A red sky at night was a sailor's delight, a promise of fair weather. But a red sky at dawn, a warning, heavy with dread. These sayings, born of generations watching the skies, became lore aboard the ships as important as compass or chart. But it was not always the storm that frightened sailors, it was the calm. Imagine standing on deck during a moonless night. The sails hang limp, the ship barely moving, the sea flat and dark as polished stone. The silence is immense. You hear your own breathing, the beat of your heart, and nothing else. This was the dreaded dead calm, when the wind vanished and the ship lay stranded. Sailors feared these moments not only for the delay, but for the silence that pressed down like a weight. Some whispered that in such stillness you could hear the voices of the drowned, whispers rising from the depths. Christopher Columbus himself, in his journal of 1492, described how his men grew restless in the endless calm of the Sargasso Sea. Seaweed floated thickly around them, the wind died, and the ocean seemed to hold them fast. The men murmured of enchantments, of strange forces that would keep them trapped forever in that silent place. To endure the long hours, sailors told tales, stories passed down from port to port, ship to ship. Many involved ghosts or omens seen during the night watch. One of the most feared was the appearance of the Flying Dutchman. This legendary ghost ship, doomed to sail forever without reaching port, was said to appear suddenly in the dark, glowing faintly against the waves. To see it was an omen of disaster. Even centuries later, in 1881, Prince George of Wales, later King George V, wrote in his diary that the Flying Dutchman was sighted by his ship's crew off the coast of Australia. The man who first spotted it died not long after, deepening the fear that the legend was real. Other sailors spoke of St. Elmo's fire, strange blue flames that sometimes danced upon the masts during storms. Today we know it as an electrical phenomenon, but to the men of the age of exploration, it was a miracle, a sign that St. Erasmus himself watched over them. To see the glowing light was to know they had a protector in the darkness. Yet there were darker visions. Sailors told of ghostly figures pacing the deck when no one was assigned above. Some swore they saw shapes moving in the rigging, climbing silently like shadows given form. Others spoke of the White Lady, a spirit said to appear before great tragedy, her pale form drifting across the deck just before dawn. Of course, not all was fear. Companionship was often the truest defense against the night. Sailors on watch told jokes, sang quiet songs, or shared stories of home. Some hummed old ballads, sea shanties that would later be sung in daylight with vigor, but here softened to whispers against the wind. A favorite tale to pass the hours was that of Jonah swallowed by the whale. The Bible story was well known, but aboard ship it took on added meaning. To sailors, Jonah was not just a prophet, he was every man who dared defy the sea, and his survival inside the great fish was a promise that even in the darkest waters, hope endured. Others told folk stories of the sea's kindness. A Portuguese tale spoke of fishermen lost in a storm who dreamed of the Virgin Mary. In the dream, she stretched her cloak across the waves, and the men awoke to find themselves washed safely ashore. Stories like these spread across cultures, giving weary men strength against the endless dark. The night watch was a liminal space, a time when men hovered between wakefulness and dream, reality and imagination. Some sailors claimed that in those hours, the line between the living and the dead grew thin. It was said that drowned men could climb silently aboard, moving unseen among the crew, brushing against the living as shadows in the night. And yet, for all the fear, there was also beauty. To stand on deck under a sky alive with stars, the Milky Way, a silver river stretching from horizon to horizon, was to feel both small and infinite at once. Many sailors, even the most hardened, admitted that they felt closer to God in those moments than in any church. The sea was their cathedral, the stars their stained glass, the wind their hymn. So the night watches passed, long, quiet, filled with vigilance and story, fear and wonder. While others slept, rocked gently in their hammocks, these men kept their silent vigil, watching over the ship as it sailed through the mysteries of the dark. Close your eyes and listen. At first, the ship is quiet. The hammocks sway, the lanterns flicker, and the sea whispers softly against the hull. But then, there is a shift. The air grows heavy, thick with something unspoken. The sailors feel it before the first drop of rain falls. The ocean has moods, and tonight she is restless. The wind rises not all at once, but in sudden, jarring gusts. A rope slaps against the mast, the sails begin to strain, and the timbers groan louder than before. The men stir in their hammocks. Some roll over, trying to ignore the change. Others whisper prayers. For every sailor knows when the storm comes at night, sleep is no refuge. Above, the heavens split. Clouds roll in, swallowing the stars. The moon disappears behind a curtain of black. Lightning flashes, sharp and sudden, burning the sky into white for a single instant. And in that instant, the world changes. The ocean is no longer a cradle. It is a beast, rising, roaring, crashing against the fragile wooden hull. The rain lashes the deck in sheets, drumming against wood and canvas, soaking every man to the bone. The wind howls through the rigging, a shriek so loud it drowns out every other sound. And beneath it all, the sea pounds relentlessly, wave after wave, slamming against the ship, tossing it like a toy in a child's hand. This was the nightmare of the sailor's life. The storm that rose without warning in the black hours of the night. Imagine lying in your hammock as the ship lurches violently. One moment you swing high into the air, the next you slam back against the wall of the hull. Barrels break free below deck, crashing like thunder. Rats squeal, scrambling for safety. The lanterns sway wildly, their flames sputtering out, plunging the lower deck into near darkness. The air grows hot with fear, thick with the cries of men praying, cursing, calling out to God. Above deck, it is chaos. Sailors stumble barefoot across slippery planks, fighting to secure the lines. The helmsman grips the wheel with white knuckles, straining to keep the ship's bow into the waves. The captain shouts orders, his voice barely carrying above the storm. And all the while lightning tears the sky open again and again, revealing mountains of water crashing down around them, higher than the tallest mast. Many believed storms were not mere accidents of weather. To sailors, storms were punishments, trials, even signs of the divine. Some said the sea was alive, a jealous goddess who rose in fury when men grew too proud. Others claimed storms came when a sinner was aboard, just as Jonah once brought the wrath of God upon his ship. More than once, in the blackest night, men whispered suspicions about their shipmates, wondering who among them had brought the storm. Storms were not rare in the age of exploration. They were inevitable, and with them came stories, some of survival, many of death. Columbus's storm of 1493. Christopher Columbus, returning from his first voyage to the New World, was caught in a violent storm. His fleet was scattered, waves breaking over the decks, lightning striking dangerously close. Columbus feared the sea would claim them before they ever reached Spain. In desperation, he wrote a brief account of his discoveries, sealed it in wax, and placed it in a cask. He cast it into the ocean, hoping the world might still learn of his voyage, even if he perished. The storm passed, and he survived. But the story of that desperate act lived on. The Spanish Armada, 1588. When King Philip II of Spain sent his mighty fleet against England, it was not English cannon alone that doomed him. Storms ripped through the Armada as it tried to retreat around Scotland and Ireland. Ships were dashed against rocky coasts, broken into splinters. Thousands of men drowned, their bodies washing ashore. Englishmen would later call it the Protestant wind, believing God himself had sent the storm to defend their island. Magellan's voyage, 1520. As Ferdinand Magellan's fleet entered the treacherous straits of southern Chile, they encountered storms so fierce that one of his ships, the Santiago, was wrecked. The crew barely escaped, clinging to wreckage, crawling onto shore in the freezing winds. For Magellan's men, the storm was a brutal reminder of how fragile their wooden ships were against the fury of nature. The wreck of the Sea Venture, 1609. Bound for Jamestown, the Sea Venture was caught in a hurricane near Bermuda. For days, the storm battered the ship until it finally ran aground on the reefs. Remarkably, nearly everyone survived, reaching the islands. They lived there for months, building new ships from the wreckage before continuing to Virginia. Shakespeare would later use this story as inspiration for his play, The Tempest. The treasure fleet of 1715. Off the coast of Florida, a Spanish fleet heavy with gold and silver from the Americas was struck by a hurricane. 11 ships were lost, treasure spilling into the sea. Hundreds of sailors drowned, and survivors told tales of waves so high they seemed to scrape the sky. Even today, coins from that fleet still wash ashore, silent echoes of the storm. Drake's voyage, 1579. Sir Francis Drake, during his circumnavigation of the globe, faced storms off the coast of California. His ship, the Golden Hind, was tossed violently, masts straining, sails tearing. Crewmen clung desperately to the rigging, certain they would be smashed upon unseen rocks. Yet Drake steered them through, later claiming that God had spared them for their holy mission against Spain. The wreck of the São João, 1552. A Portuguese carrack carrying hundreds of people, including families and soldiers, was wrecked off the coast of South Africa after a violent storm. Survivors attempted to march north, but many perished. The story of the storm and its aftermath became one of the most tragic accounts in Portuguese maritime history. The Batavia, 1629. Though remembered for mutiny and murder, the Dutch East India Company ship Batavia first met disaster when it struck reefs during a storm off Australia. Lightning, crashing seas, and panic led to chaos. The survivors reached islands, but the storm had only been the beginning of their nightmare. Hudson's final voyage, 1611. Explorer Henry Hudson, searching for the Northwest Passage, faced endless storms in the Arctic. Icebergs loomed in the darkness, winds screamed, and his men grew desperate. Though not wrecked by storm alone, the ceaseless weather drove his crew to mutiny, setting Hudson adrift with his son to die in the frozen sea. The Great Storm of 1703. Not limited to explorers, even home waters could be deadly. In 1703, a storm struck England with such force that over 200 ships were lost in the English Channel. The Royal Navy suffered devastating losses, and London itself was battered. Sailors who survived called it the wrath of heaven, a storm unlike any before or since. Amid the terror, sailors leaned on folklore. They whispered of spirits seen in the lightning, giants striding across the waves, gods of storm and thunder. Some swore that during the worst storms, they saw faces in the water, pale and staring, as if the drowned had risen to watch. Chas' prayer often muttered was to St. Nicholas, patron saint of sailors. "St. Nicholas, guide us," they whispered, as waves crashed and masts groaned. Others swore by Jonah, hoping that if one man confessed his sins, the sea might calm. Still others made offerings, tossing coins or bread into the waves, as if to appease the ocean herself. And when the storm finally broke, when the winds died, the rain ceased, and the stars slowly returned, the silence was overwhelming. The sea lay calm once more, as if nothing had happened. But the men knew differently. They bore the memory of the storm in every aching muscle, every splintered plank, every empty hammock where a comrade had once lain. Storms were teachers. They reminded sailors of their place in the world, small, fragile, mortal. Against the vastness of the ocean, against the fury of the skies, they were but shadows passing in the night. Yet somehow, again and again, they endured. Vasco da Gama's fleet, 1498. On his way to India, Vasco da Gama's ships met fierce storms near the Cape of Good Hope. The waves towered higher than the masts, smashing barrels and sweeping men overboard. The crew fell to their knees, praying to the Virgin Mary. Some claimed they saw a spectral figure walking upon the waves, pointing the way forward, an omen they believed had saved them. The wreck of the Girona, 1588. Part of the Spanish Armada, the galleass Girona fled north after the defeat. A storm struck off the Irish coast, dashing the ship against the rocks. Nearly 1,300 men were lost in a single night. Locals said the cries of the drowning could be heard for days afterward, and some believed the storm had been conjured by witches aiding the English. Zheng He's treasure fleet, 1413. The great Chinese admiral Zheng He commanded the largest fleet the world had ever seen. During one voyage, a typhoon scattered his ships across the South China Sea. Many vessels were lost, and survivors later told tales of dragon spirits rising from the waves, their glowing eyes seen in the flashes of lightning. The loss of the San Esteban, 1554. A Spanish ship wrecked off the coast of Texas during a hurricane, its crew crawling ashore only to face hostile conditions and starvation. Survivors told stories of hearing phantom bells in the storm, perhaps from drowned priests who had once sailed those waters. The Plymouth Storm, 1620. Before the Pilgrims reached America, the Mayflower endured a brutal storm in the Atlantic. The main beam cracked, threatening to break the ship apart. By lantern light, the crew wedged it back in place with a giant screw brought from Holland. Some later claimed divine providence held the beam steady, saving the colonists from certain death. The Kronen disaster, 1676. In the Baltic Sea, Sweden's warship Kronen was caught in a sudden storm. The ship capsized, gunpowder ignited, and the vessel exploded, killing more than 800 men. Survivors spoke of whirlpools pulling sailors into the depths, their screams drowned by the thunder. The Kronen disaster, 1676. In the Baltic Sea, Sweden's warship Kronen was caught in a sudden storm. The ship capsized, gunpowder ignited, and the vessel exploded, killing more than 800 men. Survivors spoke of whirlpools pulling sailors into the depths, their screams drowned by the thunder. The Kamikaze Typhoon, 1281. When Kublai Khan sent his fleet to conquer Japan, a typhoon struck with devastating force. Thousands of Mongol ships were smashed against the shore, ending the invasion. The Japanese named the storm Kamikaze, the divine wind, believing their gods had intervened to protect them. The Essex, 1820. Though more famous for the whale that rammed it, the Essex first endured a fierce storm rounding Cape Horn. For weeks, the crew fought against gales, sails shredding, ropes snapping, men clinging to wet decks. The storm pushed them so far off course that their voyage of suffering was only just beginning. The Medusa, 1816. Off the coast of Africa, the French frigate Medusa ran aground after storms drove her off course. Hundreds were forced onto a makeshift raft. For 13 days they endured starvation, storms, and madness. Their suffering later inspired the painting The Raft of the Medusa, a haunting reminder of the sea's cruelty. The Great Hurricane of 1780. The deadliest Atlantic storm on record struck the Caribbean. Entire fleets were lost, with ships vanishing into walls of water. Survivors claimed they saw waves taller than churches, lightning that never ceased, and entire islands swallowed. More than 20,000 perished, and sailors whispered that the hurricane was no natural storm, but the hand of God. The legend of the Flying Dutchman. In storm after storm, sailors told of a ghostly ship that appeared through the rain and lightning, the Flying Dutchman. Condemned to sail forever, her crew were phantoms, waving silent warnings to the living. To see her was to know your own ship was doomed. Cook's third voyage, 1778. Captain James Cook nearly lost his ships to a storm in the Pacific. The Resolution and Discovery were battered for days. Men clung to ropes until their hands bled. Cook himself stood on deck through the storm, giving orders, refusing to rest. To the crew, his defiance seemed superhuman, though they whispered he had angered the gods of the sea. The Black Squall of 1749. In the Caribbean, British sailors described a sudden storm so fierce that the sky turned green-black at noon. Lightning struck the mast, killing 3 men instantly. Survivors swore the storm had come from nowhere and vanished just as quickly, leaving behind wreckage and disbelief. A sailor's fable, the Sea Witch. Old mariners told of a woman who appeared on deck during storms, her hair whipping like seaweed, her eyes burning with lightning. She offered bargains, safety for a price. Some claimed she was the sea herself, demanding tribute. If ignored, the storm would grow until the ship was torn apart. the typhoon of 1609. A Japanese fleet headed to Korea was destroyed by a typhoon. Survivors claimed they saw ghostly warriors in the clouds, riding on horses of lightning. To them, the storm was no accident, but the work of ancient spirits defending the homeland. The wreck of the Halsewell, 1786. A British East Indiaman was caught in a storm off the Dorset coast. As the ship broke apart on the rocks, Captain Richard Pearce is said to have wept openly, declaring he had brought ruin on both his family and his crew. His story became legend, a cautionary tale of pride and fate. The Cyclone of Calcutta, 1864. In India, a storm destroyed hundreds of ships anchored near Calcutta. Witnesses said the river itself rose up, swallowing entire villages. Mariners told of seeing temples collapse into the waters, as though the gods themselves had struck in anger. The Curse of Jonah. Whenever a storm raged, sailors sometimes demanded to know if one among them was hiding a terrible sin. Just as Jonah had nearly doomed his ship, so too might an unconfessed sinner draw the storm's wrath. More than one unlucky sailor was cast into the sea to appease the waves. The Oranje, 1771. A Dutch East India ship sailing near the Cape of Good Hope was torn apart by a gale. Survivors reported seeing strange lights beneath the waves, lanterns, they thought, from drowned ships sailing below them. To some, it was a warning. To others, a vision of the underworld. A fable of the storm bride. Sailors spoke of a bride lost at sea, taken by a storm on her wedding day. In every storm thereafter, her ghost was said to appear, dressed in white, beckoning sailors to join her beneath the waves. Those who followed were never seen again. The Lisbon Storm, 1755. After the great earthquake of Lisbon, a storm lashed the coast, scattering ships and survivors alike. Witnesses claimed the sea itself rose in fury, as if the world's order had been undone. The disaster became proof to many that God's judgment could arrive by sea as well as land. The whalers of Nantucket. Whalers in the 18th century often told of storms conjured by the whales themselves. They believed great leviathans could summon tempests with a slap of their tails. Some even said the storms were revenge for the harpoons lodged in their flesh. A Tale of the Drowned King. Fishermen in Brittany told of a king who defied the sea gods. In the middle of a storm, his ghost ship still sails, lit by green fire. Those who hear his laughter on the wind know death is close. The Princess Augusta, 1738. Known as the Palatine Light, this emigrant ship wrecked off Rhode Island in a winter storm. Survivors claimed the captain had abandoned his passengers. For years after, a ghostly light was seen on stormy nights near Block Island, believed to be the doomed ship reliving her final hours. A sailor's fable, the singing waves. Some sailors swore that in the midst of the storm they heard voices in the waves, songs mournful and sweet. These, they said, were the sirens, calling men to surrender to the sea. Many a sailor, they warned, went mad listening to that music. The Admiral Gardner, 1809. This East Indiaman was wrecked on the Goodwin Sands in a gale, scattering treasure across the sea floor. Survivors spoke of waves that glowed faintly blue as though alive, and many believed spirits guarded the wreck ever after. A tale of the cursed compass. Superstition held that if a compass spun wildly during a storm, it was not merely the magnetism of the storm, but the influence of demons. A cursed compass, they said, would lead a ship into the jaws of the storm again and again, until all aboard were lost. the HMS Ramillies, 1782. Caught in a hurricane off Newfoundland, the Ramillies broke apart despite desperate efforts. Captain Henry Watson ordered his men to pray as the ship sank, choosing faith in the storm's final moment. His story became part of naval lore for its dignity in despair. The endless tempest, a fable told of a storm that never ended, a cursed cloud that roamed the seas forever. Sailors who vanished in it were said to become part of the storm itself, their cries joining the thunder, their faces appearing in the lightning. To glimpse that storm, they said, was to glimpse eternity. When the ship finally grew quiet, when the watches were set and the lanterns dimmed, the sailors closed their eyes in their swaying hammocks, and the world of sleep came for them. But to sleep at sea was never simple. Dreams aboard a ship carried weight. They were not dismissed as fleeting illusions. They were omens, messages, whispers from the sea itself, from God, or from forces far older than either. Imagine yourself lying in one of those hammocks now. Canvas wraps gently around your body, the ropes creak softly above, and the ship rocks with the pulse of the waves. Your breathing slows. The sounds of footsteps fade as the men above keep watch. All that remains is the hum of the ocean, the hiss of water against the hull, and the soft chorus of snoring and muttering from men all around you. In this place, the mind does not rest easily. The sea seeps into the dreams of sailors, shaping them into visions both beautiful and terrifying. For many, the first dreams that came were of home. A fisherman from Portugal might dream of the green cliffs near Lisbon, the smell of olives and wine. An English sailor might see the rolling fields of Devon, his mother's hearth glowing with embers. An Italian might dream of bells tolling across Florence, their sound carrying on warm winds. These dreams were bittersweet. They comforted men with images of familiar shores, yet often left them waking with hollow longing. Some said to dream of home was dangerous. It meant your spirit was trying to leave the ship, to drift back to land. To wake from such a dream could leave a man disoriented. even sick with homesickness. But others embraced them, believing such dreams were gifts, proof that their families still thought of them across the distance of oceans. Not all dreams were gentle. Sailors told of prophetic visions, strange warnings in the night that foretold shipwrecks, storms, or death. One Spanish log from the 16th century tells of a sailor who dreamed of a great black wave rising higher than the masts. He woke shouting, and within days the fleet was caught in a hurricane that drowned half his companions. From then on, he was treated with reverence, as though he could see the will of the sea. Other sailors dreamed of coffins floating in the water, or of ships' bells tolling without hands to strike them. Such dreams were taken seriously. If one man dreamed of drowning, others might whisper that a death was near. To dream of fire on the ship was considered a terrible omen, for nothing was more feared than flames at sea. The sea was believed to send its own visions. Some sailors swore that the ocean could slip into a man's mind, filling it with voices of drowned mariners. They told of dreams where they walked on the ocean floor, surrounded by glowing fish, seaweed waving like curtains, and the bones of old ships scattered across the sand. In these dreams, drowned sailors would beckon them closer, whispering secrets of lost gold or warning of reefs ahead. Christopher Columbus, 1492. Columbus himself recorded in his journal that sailors dreamed of land long before they saw it. They would awaken claiming they had smelled flowers, heard birdsong, or walked upon sand. These visions spread through the crew, strengthening their hope. Days later, they sighted the islands of the Bahamas. Magellan's voyage, 1520. One account tells of a sailor dreaming that his ship was trapped in ice, unable to move. Weeks later, Magellan's fleet was indeed locked in the frozen waters of Patagonia. The men remembered the dream and whispered of curses. Dutch East India Company, 1600s. Sailors in the VOC wrote of men who dreamed of ghost ships appearing in fog. When one sailor on the Haarlem described such a dream, The ship soon struck a reef near Table Bay. His shipmates were convinced his vision had been a true warning. The Dreamer's Bargain. A tale told of a man who dreamed each night of a stranger offering him gold, but if he accepted it in the dream, he would never wake. He resisted night after night until exhaustion overcame him, and one morning his hammock hung empty. The Endless Shore. Another fable told of a sailor who dreamed of stepping off the ship and walking on an endless beach, waves lapping at his feet. He walked and walked, never turning back, until his shipmate said he died in his sleep, his spirit lost on that shore. The Silverfish. In one story, a sailor dreamed of catching a fish whose scales shone brighter than coins. When he woke, he searched the sea for weeks, certain the dream promised treasure. But the tale always ends the same. He leapt overboard, chasing a glint of silver, and was never seen again. The Lantern Below the Sea. Some whispered of dreams where a light burned beneath the waves, calling sailors to follow. To see that lantern meant your time was near. Many men, after confessing such a dream, died in the next storm. Of course, not all visions were warnings or prophecies. Many were nightmares born of hunger, exhaustion, or fear. Men dreamed of water filling the ship, of being dragged beneath the waves by unseen hands, of storms that never ended. Some woke screaming, their voices echoing through the dark hold, waking others in a ripple of fear. Nightmares could spread like fire. If one man dreamed of the ship sinking, suddenly others would report similar visions until the whole crew grew restless, half believing they were doomed. Dreams were, in the end, the only escape from the endless sea. For in the quiet hours of the night, when hammocks swayed and lanterns flickered low, the boundary between waking and dreaming grew thin. Sailors floated not just on waves of water, but on waves of visions, Memories, warnings, fantasies, and terrors, all stirred by the vast, unknowable ocean that surrounded them. And so our voyage through the night draws to a close. We have walked the decks beneath the stars, listened to the creak of timbers and the whisper of the wind, rested in hammocks beside weary sailors, and drifted through the dreams, fears, and stories that filled the dark hours of the sea. If you've enjoyed this journey, I invite you to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more voyages into the past, and share in the comments where in the world you are listening from tonight. It's always wonderful to see this community of dreamers and explorers growing, no matter how far apart our shores may be. For now, close your eyes, let the rhythm of the waves carry you and allow sleep to take you gently, as it once carried those sailors across the oceans of the world. Good night, and safe travels in your dreams.